Welcome in, everybody, to the Bare Knuckle Recovery Podcast. As always, I'm Tommy Streeter, along with Nate Mollering. What episode is this?
15.
Episode 15. Because the last one was 14, so now we're at 15. So, as you guys can see, we have two guests with us today. We've got Sam Helser and Andrew Norris. They are two of the members of the Bare Knuckle Recovery team. So anytime somebody sends in messages to our Facebook page, or if they send us an email or reach out to us in whatever one way or another, Sam and Andrew are two of the people who may be responding. As Nate said before we got started, they also might show up at your house.
Yep.
If you need to get into treatment, but you're hesitant about it.
Yep.
They're happy to come talk to you about it.
Yep.
So we just wanted to bring them on today to introduce them to everybody. We've done a couple of podcasts like this in the past where we've had, Jamie and Alicia, Zach, a few of the others on, and Sam and Andrew are two of our newer members. I think they've both been here for a few months now. So it was time to have them on. They withstood the first few months, so they earned the right to sit on the couch.
There you go.
So here they are.
Yep.
So we just wanted them to come in and tell everybody a little bit about themselves, share some of their story, where they came from, and how they got to where they are today. So Sam, since you started first,
yes, sir,
we will go ahead and start with you. So just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. So with me, I manage the South Allen County, Huntington, Wabash area. It's a pretty tough area, but, I got into this role because we'll back up a little bit. I was born in Indianapolis, adopted to a family in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and there was a part of me that was always missing, right? No matter what I tried to water that plant with, so to speak, I've tried women, I've tried drugs, I've tried alcohol. Nothing really ever fixed it. And when you're trapped in that cycle, it leads you to treatment center after treatment center. It leads you to jail after jail. It leads you to overdose after overdose, halfway house after halfway house. And eventually, no matter who told me what, I had to figure out that, I was tired of that cycle. My mom could be tired of that cycle. The court system could be tired of that cycle. But really, I had to be tired of it as well. And I had to get to a point where I was fed up. Luckily, I survived that battle. Even after overdosing multiple times, I was lucky to be one of the ones that made it out. I was seeking treatment, whatever that looked like, got to a point where I ended up at, Fort Wayne Recovery, went through that process. And I think at that point, I still wasn't ready to admit my powerlessness. I was still doing it for everybody else, still doing it for the court system, still doing it for my parents. Eventually got to the place where, I relapsed after that program. I think it was actually, the first day I was out of that program. Went to have a drink, ended up getting an OWI. That was my fourth OWI at the time. I was done. I was beaten. I was battered. I got sent to Huntington County Jail on a probation violation. That judge was done with me. She had given me 3 opportunities. So she sat me down the remainder of my sentence, which was 9 months. I just did that time and reflected on who I wanted to be. Luckily during that time, my mom would always answer the phone call. I always talked to my mom and my dad. And my mom was also willing to send me books in. So, she sent me in the big book. She sent me in the NA book. And I just started reading those because, what else did I have to do? I could sit and I could watch, Duck Dynasty or whatever the guys in the block were watching at that time. But I had done that before. I had been there before, and it didn't get me anywhere except for back incarcerated. So, I read and I read and I read, and eventually I got to the point where, I would pull a guy or two in with me and we would just talk about, hey, what does your journey look like? How did you end up here? And eventually that, led to 4 or 5 guys out at the table talking. And eventually, we would end in the block, talking as a block. Hey, how'd everybody's day go today? What do we have to look forward to when we get out of here? And I felt purpose in that. And I felt like there was a driving factor there. I could do this. I could talk to people. I could help people get through it. I was okay with going down the road for 10 and a half years because I still didn't know what would go on with that Grant County case. I had a peace that I had never felt before. So about that time, when I was reflecting and things were starting to look up, not on the outside necessarily, but on the inside, I was talking to my attorney and he said, "Hey, you got approved for Grant County Drug Court." And I said, "You know what? All right, cool. A lot of people have failed that program, but let's see what it has to offer. I'm willing to try anything at this point." So I got out of Huntington County Jail. And I immediately had to report to the Grace House, where actually this was the first guy that I met there. And he's part of my story. He's a huge part of my story. Got to the Grace House, and tried to start working an actual program, tried to start going to meetings, not just for the women, not just because I was out of cigarettes and knew I could bum a cigarette from somebody at the meeting, but I actually wanted to pour something in and get something out of those meetings.
So it wasn't just about what you could get. You wanted to help other people.
Right. And that's kind of where my recovery shifted. Was it's not just about me anymore. I've been so caught up in what's Sam going to get out of this that, I lost contact of who I actually was. So then, I started focusing on how can I help the next person. And that's a huge part of the 12 steps is just helping the next person, doing the next right thing. So that's what I decided to do. And no matter where that took me, I was okay as long as I just kept doing that next right thing. As I said, I met Andrew, and I met a couple other good guys, and I built myself a small little community. Sam's decisions never got Sam to a good spot. Sam's decisions always got Sam to a pretty bad spot. So I decided to surround myself with a network of people that would hold me accountable. That looked like my probation officer through drug court. His name was Reggie, great guy. That looked like Andrew and a couple of other guys at the house, and just some other people in the community that I could go to, talk to. And before I knew something was wrong with me or something was off, they knew, and they would call me out on that. So I kept that cycle going until I graduated, and it's important for me to keep that cycle going after I graduate. That time while I was at the Grace House and in Huntington County Jail, those built some very strong principles on which I can put into my recovery today. That was the foundation for success, and that's what I keep moving forward. Just going back to the basics someday, just not picking up, making that phone call. That's all I can do sometimes, and that's what I do because that's what got me through, so that's what's going to get me through.
So you feel like you were finally at a spot where you were willing to let some people do the thinking for you.
Yeah, absolutely. My thinking gets me in the worst spots, so let's try somebody else.
And how hard was it for you to humble yourself to let other grown men tell you what you should and shouldn't do next? Was that difficult for you?
No, because I looked at it as, if I'm spending my life in treatment or in jail, there's going to be grown men telling me what I can and can't do anyway.
Right.
So I might as well have the benefits and the positives of living a free life and having some free choice in what I want to do, and being able to express myself and being in a safe environment while doing it.
I always like to say there's no freedom without responsibility.
Absolutely.
And so what the cool thing about it is you got to pick the people you were going to listen to instead of the court telling you you're going to listen to these people because you refuse to listen to anybody else.
Absolutely.
And I love to highlight that in your story because I think it's so crucial for so many people to understand is that, you can pick the group around you who's going to dictate what you do or one will be given to you. Essentially, and I know people aren't your higher power, but it is a power greater than yourself, right? To let a group of people come around you and influence you. Like you pick a higher power or one will be chosen for you. I always like to highlight that for people if they're struggling.
Absolutely. And that goes hand in hand with the higher power of my understanding.
Yeah.
What I don't do for myself, my higher power is going to do for me.
Awesome.
And at the time that was people. When I first got into the rooms, there's God in the steps. And I was like, I can't relate to that. It pushed me away. And I went to a meeting and someone said, one of the old timers in there said, it's all about your good, orderly direction.
The first time I heard that, it was
it blew my mind.
Yeah, it really did. Because I always struggled with that too. For a long time, I honestly didn't even know if I believed in God or not. But then my thought was, even if God is real, like I don't want anything to do with that just because of how terrible my life was, even though my life was terrible because of my own decisions that I had made. As we know now, God doesn't mess with free will. But the first time I heard that, it really just kind of opened my mind up to the possibility of that, even of having a higher power.
Absolutely. And that pushed me into, where I'm at spiritually now. And I couldn't be I'm happy. Yes, I'll have some work to do, but I'm comfortable with where I'm at. And for the first time in my life, I can say that I'm in a good place. And there's days where I'm not okay, but today I'm okay with not being okay. So.
Right.
I'm just kind of surprised that Duck Dynasty didn't keep you sober.
Well, you know what?
Yeah.
Did you even give it a shot?
Not that time. Not that time. Other times, yes, but not that time.
Si's a pretty good guy, man. Come on.
Yeah, he is. He is.
The beards, man. So, Andrew, tell us a little about yourself and your story. And
Yeah, I got sober watching Duck Dynasty.
all right.
It was around episode 9. You can bet that, Jack. No, I grew up in Indianapolis on the west side in a town called Speedway. Had a pretty...
I hear there's a racetrack there.
I heard there was. I don't remember one. Interestingly enough, I lived there. I went to all school there. Never went to a race. So growing up there, it's more like a Mardi Gras vibe.
Right.
And it wasn't about. I went to a qualification though, but it was partying. So that was very much like my childhood was in teen years was based around partying and having a good time. Played sports, basketball, baseball, football. But as I got older, that started to be less important, and I didn't have a ton of direction. Following school and having no direction, my dad always told me you were never joining the military. He was an Army guy. When I was 18, no job, no direction, he said, you're joining the Army. So joined the Army and did a deployment, was stationed in Schofield Barracks, Hawaii. So at this stage, the Army gave me some structure in my life. I did really good up until my deployment and coming back. So during my deployment, it's a stressful situation to be in, and I had literally no healthy coping mechanisms for dealing with life in general, let alone the things you deal with in a war zone. So they prescribed me medication, Klonopin, to keep me stable, and it worked while I was there. But when I got back from deployment, we go through medical discharge, and they looked at the dose that I was on, and they said, you can absolutely not have this dose. Not understanding medications or withdrawals or any of those things, I said, I'm fine. I'm back from deployment. I'm good to go. And I was good for about a week. Everything was exciting. Everything's new. And then that second week came around, and life got real quick. And I could tell something was off in me. Something felt different. I wasn't comfortable. I was anxious. But I wasn't able to identify these things. I just knew I'm not okay. I did recreational drugs in high school, nothing crazy. So most soldiers at that time will go into alcohol. That's the typical. I was never much of a big drinker, but I knew opiates were something I enjoyed the feeling of. So I found some Vicodin, took a pill, and felt normal. Felt good. I didn't have that anxiety. I didn't have that stress. I felt comfortable in my skin again. And I was like, this is it. And so after about a month of taking Vicodin every day, I couldn't find Vicodin. And I had tried Oxycontin years before in high school, and it was so strong, it made me nod out, and I was like, that's horrible. I can't be awake. I don't want that. But it was the only thing in the opiate realm I could get my hands on. So I was like, okay, I can take a fraction of this and get the similar result. So it started off with just, a quarter of a pill, and just continued to progress and progress. And I remember one day a girl knocking on my door about 8 o'clock in the morning. And so I'm upset. It's a weekend. Someone's waking me up. And so I answer the door, and the girl says, hey, do you have any oxys? And I'm like, why are you waking me up so early? She said,
She wanted some oxys.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
So I'm new into this, and I was like, this behavior is, and she said, I'm sick. I need some oxys. And I said,
So had you not experienced withdrawal from that at this point? So that's why you didn't understand.
I said, if you are sick,
girl doing?
you need to go to a doctor.
Right. Yeah.
I'm just naive
You
to
ruined her day.
addiction. Right. Well, she says, I'm sick because I haven't had oxys. And in my head, I said, you dope fiend.
Right.
You dope fiend.
Get out of here, junkie.
And so I was not the best guy then. And so I said, you are a dope fiend. She said, if you stop taking them, you'll get sick too. And me, Mr. I do everything.
You're like, I'm about to prove this girl wrong.
Yeah. So I say, okay, whatever. I go back to bed. I wake up. And I'm like, I'm not going to take any oxy today. You know, I've been through a war. I've been through chaos in high school. I'm
handle
strong-willed. Yeah. I put my mind to everything. I can do it. And about 4 hours in,
I was just about to say about 4 hours later, he said, all right.
4 hours in, I started to get the sweats and my heart sunk into my stomach.
Yep.
And I knew, and this overwhelming feeling came over me that I was no longer in control of my life.
Right.
That it wasn't like a choice whether I was going to take oxy or not, or some form of opiate. Like I had to, due to the physical addiction.
So then that scared you and you got sober right there, right? Never
Right.
touched again.
And that's my story, y'all. A couple episodes of Duck Dynasty.
The
we were
one
good
chip
to go.
wonder.
Yeah, so absolutely not. So what that meant was I needed to stock up. So because that's the
It's logical,
right,
reasonable,
that's the
right.
logical way. Well, and so it seems logical in that moment because
Yeah.
Yeah, you're going to save them for later, right?
Right.
right. But the tolerance and all that, you can't keep up with an addiction. Doesn't matter how much you have. So needless to say, I wasn't soldiering the greatest. I got out a couple months early than I was supposed to, and gratefully I was not dishonorably discharged. Got out where I still got my benefits and everything worked out, except I had a full-fledged opiate addiction.
Right.
And so through a number of bad choices, I came back to Indiana and I was like, oh, this is horrible. You know,
Hold on, I have a question.
Yeah.
At that time, did anybody else know? Like other than the people that you might have been buying them from, or that chick that showed up at your house, like did your family, like your friends, did anyone know?
I had some family members that were in addiction themselves that knew, but no one that was not in addiction.
Gotcha.
I worked really hard to keep it a secret. So PT in the morning, they call our names for drug screens. That means I wear a Wizinator out to PT every morning to see if my name's called.
And for those who don't know, what's a Wizinator?
So it's a strap that goes around your waist, has a little compartment where fake urine is stored with a hose that runs down by your groin so that you can provide that for a sample.
Pretend to go to the bathroom.
Right. And so when they would not call my name, then I would have to make a reason to run to my room, take that off because we were about to go on a run. So I worked hard to not, and I mean, I should have absolutely got a dishonorable discharge because I was, not well. But
So the fear of being sick outweighed the fear of being dishonorably discharged.
yeah. So one of the things. The way I've described it is the pain of being sober outweighed the consequences of my use. And so not using the substance, I was not okay just sober. That was painful.
Torture.
To be like that. So the substance is my solution to that pain I'm feeling. So removing that substance without putting something else in, that was torture. And I came to find that out a couple treatment centers later. But
So you came back to Indiana.
came
Sorry
back to Indiana.
interrupt,
No,
but-
you're good. And then I was like, you know what? It's Indiana. That's the problem. Or, it was Hawaii at first, and then I came to Indiana.
I'm going to interrupt you again.
No, you're
this is
good.
what I do. So you were in Hawaii when that started.
Yeah, so my addiction started in Hawaii.
Was it, what year was that around?
So that was like 2010.
Okay, so right around that time when oxys were everywhere. Was it like that in Hawaii too?
Oh, you would think there was not much there.
That's why I was wondering,
There was
'cause I obviously have no idea.
27 days out of the month, I could go I was going and buying a script from someone on the island.
Okay.
So it was, you would think, oh, it's a little island, there's not much there. There is more. Thankfully, I wasn't doing like meth and some other drugs.
Yeah.
But it's flooded there. It's insane.
It's not surprising.
One question I have was, in 2010, was this a pretty normal problem in the military? Do you know, were there a lot of other people that were struggling with pill abuse or
So
mostly alcohol?
Not to my knowledge, it was
Good.
alcohol.
Alcohol.
And at that time, people were getting kicked out for getting DUIs.
Gotcha.
So, and there was this idea that if you talk about having an alcohol problem, you are risking your job and your career.
Right.
There's no way you can bring up another addiction, a more serious illegal one, let alone one that you can just go to a store and buy it over the counter.
Yeah.
So the atmosphere was one where it's like you have to deal with this on your own. And I tried numerous times just to white knuckle it.
Yep.
But the pain is it was too much.
And every time you tried to white knuckle it, when you told yourself, tomorrow we're not getting high, did you mean it?
100%.
You believed
Took
it
me
in
to
you.
a lie
Yeah.
detector. I believed it
passed.
wholeheartedly.
Yep.
When I called my family, I said, "This is it. I just need $100 so I can get food and I can have everything squared away so I'm comfortable." While
You meant it.
I meant it. I meant it. 3 hours in, that money went to go buy oxys.
Yep.
You know, and so that's a tough thing. And I'm wearing on my family. I'm wearing on my friends. I'm borrowing people's cars. I'm doing all kinds of stuff. And I'm genuinely like mean the things I say, but somewhere in that process, I'm not in control anymore.
Yep.
And that addiction says, okay, now we're in a good place. Your good heart and everything that you mean got us the resources. Now let's go have some fun. Now let's go get well. Now let's go, enjoy life or get these feelings away. So I'm in Indiana now, struggling with this addiction, and I'm like, you know what? It's all these places that I'm at. That's the problem. I can move to Seattle, get away. I can move away from this addiction, and I brought myself with me to Seattle, and it was within 2-3 weeks maybe I had connections and was buying Roxy's there. So I was like, okay. At that time I lost everything I had acquired in the military. Came back to Indiana broken and pretty much suicidal because life was horrible at that point. And that was the first time I had legal intervention. So I was arrested and went to jail, got out and went to treatment for the first time. And so went to a faith-based treatment center, spent about 2 years just reading the Bible and spending time with other people working like recovery. We didn't really do any 12-step programs or anything like that. And I did good when I stayed in that environment. But as soon as I got out of that environment and disconnected from those people and the church and things of that nature, I was right back to my full-fledged addiction. And so I spent about like another 5 years struggling and just really maintaining. So Suboxone, a little meth here, some heroin, because at that time oxys were no longer around. Yeah. So it progressed to IV heroin use. Yep. So now I have a syringe problem, which brings overdoses. Because now I'm injecting heroin. And fentanyl was just starting to creep in. So every now and again, you get that batch, and next thing I know, I'll wake up and I'm in the hospital or I'm in jail.
Right.
And so now legal cases start to come, and I started getting charged with syringes. And so through a number of different probation programs, I tried Veterans Treatment Court in Montgomery County. That didn't work out well for me because due to my fault. But eventually, I got to a point where I was brought to Marion, Indiana to do the VA SART program, which is the Substance Abuse Resistance Treatment something. So basically an addiction treatment center based out of the Marion, VA, and did well there. So I did great in treatment. I got my family's hopes up. Things were always good in treatment. I never got in trouble. I won't say I never got in trouble, but on the surface, I was doing well. But the second I would get out of those treatment programs, I would go back to old Andrew. And so it ended up being, I woke up in Grant County and I had acquired 5 felony syringe charges, all separate. So I have 3 in Grant County, 1 in Allen County, and another in Montgomery County. Boone County. And so I'm looking at the Northern Indiana jail tour, going around and addressing these. And I got it worked out where everything got combined into Veterans Treatment Court. And so at this time, I am each time I was getting out, I was trying to do it a little better. I was like, okay, it's these people I'm hanging out with. That's the problem. Or it's this place that I'm around. That's the problem. Or it's this girl that I'm spending time with. That's the problem. There's always these external things. And I improved a little bit each time. But when I woke up in that jail cell and had 5 felony syringe charges and was like, I'm going to be terminated from this. I'm going to go to prison. I'm going to go do 10 years because I signed max pleas for syringe charges. And I fought that internal struggle of I'm just using drugs. I'm only harming myself. This is BS. But I was like, I'll go to prison and I'll figure it out as I always do. My family was supportive. gave me money until I called my dad in jail. And I was like, hey, I'm back in jail. I need a lawyer and I need some money on my books. And he said, I can't help you anymore. Mm-hmm. And that made me so mad because he could help me. He could. Financially, he was capable of helping me.
So in that moment, you were angry at him.
I was so mad. Mm-hmm. I was so mad. And it was, woe is me.
Yeah, you're a victim.
Yeah. How can you say this to your son who you didn't, raise perfectly? And majority of this probably has something to, all that stuff that I told myself. And so I was like, okay, you are out of my life. Good. So they came and got me one morning, and at this point, I'm ready to go to prison. And they said, we're going to release you to the Grace House. And I'm thinking, what are you guys doing? I have tried this over and over and continue to show that I have no ability to lead my own life, to make the right decisions, to be successful in any of these areas. And so what happened in that moment is my reality that I had built was challenged. So this idea that the police were after me, the judges were after me, probation was after, if all these people would just leave me alone, I would be fine. These people are out to get me. They just have nothing to do. They want my money, all that. They just want my money for court fees and all that stuff. It was like, hold on, I've given up on myself and you guys are giving me another chance. So that really challenged this story I'd built in my head. And so I got out that time, and I was sitting in my probation officer's office, and he was a very soft-spoken guy. And I said, you know what? I know what I need to do this time. I know where I messed up these other times, and he looked at me and said, maybe you don't know what you need to do. Mm. And that was the first time he'd really challenged me, and I was so offended. I've got certificates, how many treatment programs?
I was in the Army, what the hell are you talking about?
Yeah. How many treatment centers I've completed?
Yeah, I can tell you everything they're going to say.
Right.
I can spit the book out right now.
Right. I've done it. And so in the moment, it made me a little hot, and I went home and I kind of processed it, and I was like, he's right. I don't know. I know some things, but I don't know everything, and I don't know how to apply it. Mm. So in that moment, I made a decision that I'm not going to lead my life anymore. I'm going to concede my control on what I'm doing to this guy who to the probation and the court, who obviously want the best for me. Because I was ready to go to prison, and they said, no, we see potential in you. And so at that moment, I conceded my decisions, not perfectly, but for the majority of things, if you say I need to do meetings, I'm going to go to meetings. If you say I need to go to Grace House, I'll go to Grace House. And I'm very fortunate that they didn't sit here and say, you need to do X, Y, Z. They worked with me in making better decisions. So it was I had about 9 months clean. And I was at the Grace House, sober living with a bunch of good guys, going to 6 meetings a week, and I relapsed. And I'm like, how did this happen? Mm. How I'm in sober living with a good group of guys going to 6 meetings a week. And I had to and so now I'm freaking out. Am I going to get violated? And something came over me and said, you have to take control of this. You can sit back and let the probation, the courts decide what your punishment's going to be, or you can really take a look at your life and see where your reservations are in your recovery. And so that's what I did. I sat down and I made an action plan. So I was still taking a medication, gabapentin, that I was physically dependent on, but it was prescribed by a doctor and non-narcotic, all that stuff I took. But every morning I was waking up and eating them to have a head change. Yeah. So I was stopping that. I was going to meetings, but I was not willing to get a sponsor and work the steps. So that I'm going to do that now. Also, I'm going to get rid of Facebook because I have no ability to make good decisions on who I should be friends with.
What were you doing on Facebook, Andrew?
A whole lot of stuff I shouldn't have been.
We've had this conversation before.
Yeah.
We don't have to have it again right now.
Looking for value, looking for something to keep me, a distraction, stuff that I was nowhere at a place in my life that I needed to be inviting any of that external stuff in.
So were you using people and stuff like you used your dope?
Absolutely.
To feel better?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And for that matter, food.
Yes.
Because I'm not using my drug of choice, but whatever gives me that little dopamine hit, the Facebook person giving you attention, or that cheesecake or that food that you eat, and that becomes, I've just replaced the stuff here.
Yep.
And so, I put together the action plan. I presented it, and I was like, this is the stuff I need to work on. And I did all those things. Also, I did 90 and 90. Got a sponsor, worked the steps. During all this, I'm going to therapy and counseling through the VA and addressing some of my mental health issues because I was still really struggling from my mental health standpoint, and worked with professionals to get on appropriate medications, worked in therapy and counseling, did CBT and a number of other things that really made me understand how my thoughts affect my behaviors, which affect my emotions, and challenging how I see the world and my beliefs. So in all that, having that my mental health stable, and getting a sponsor and working a 12-step program started to radically change my life. And so I felt the first bit of freedom that I had ever felt, in a peace. And that all came from when I surrendered. At that time, it was Andrew makes horrible decisions. Andrew's going to stop making as many decisions, and I'm going to concede that to a God of my understanding. Yeah. And so working with a sponsor, doing life with other people with a similar trajectory of life, Sam being one of those people. He actually showed up when I was just running to meetings and not willing to get a sponsor. And he was one of the first people that was talking about getting a sponsor and working the steps that really pushed me. It's it's an okay thing to do, because the idea was everyone just lives here and is sober, but doesn't do the work. So him bringing that up, I don't know if he even knows this, him just verbalizing that made it an okay thing to do and not corny or lame to actually work a recovery program.
I feel like someone told you that, Sam, at one point, maybe.
Yeah, someone may have.
Along the way of the journey there. Yeah. Oh, that's weird. I don't know. Maybe not. I don't know.
Well, and that's the cool thing of how this one person pours into another that pours into another, and that's how this recovery thing grows, and we all help each other. So I found a passion for serving others and helping, and became an active member in AA. And Sam and I became really passionate about service work. We would go to parks and start groups, just inviting people to go clean up parks, and little random things that were not about us. Things that living a life that wasn't centered on Andrew pleasing Andrew or Sam pleasing Sam. What can we just do for our community? What can we do for another person? And because that provides a joy that nothing else does. There's something there, and became passionate about serving, and then got my certification as a peer, started working in the recovery field, and giving back. And it's just been a journey. So, I'm really fortunate to get to work with a number of people that challenge me and help me grow. Because at the end of the day, I'm never fully recovered. And it continues to take surrounding myself people like you that will call me on my crap, or hold me accountable, or just act in a way where I'm that's where I want to get to. I want to continue to grow. And so I have to continue doing my basics. I have to continue going to meetings and staying in contact, staying humble. And it's a challenge. I'm not going to sit here and say everything's easy and perfect, but it's a way easier way of life. If I zoom out of my life right now, my life is amazing. I should be dead or in prison. There's no doubt about it. And the fact that my life looks like it does today, my sponsor told me, and this is kind of one of those corny sponsor things, but when I was doing my step 9, he said, picture your life a year from now. And I was okay. And I pictured a sweet life, picturing real big. And he said, all right, what you just pictured, if you continue on this path and working this program, you will have short-sold yourself. And I'm okay, good line. That's an AA thing. Flash forward a year from then, and I would have short sold myself if I just had the life that I pictured. And so it's this cool thing that continues to give and grow. And so I don't know where my life is heading. And the cool thing is I don't have to, because I work a program where I believe there's something guiding me that has my best interest. Because when Andrew guides Andrew, it ends up in...
It's all bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Same for all of us.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to add a little caveat that in working those steps and the part where I was making my amends, I had to make amends to my dad.
Yeah.
And part of that process was not me addressing any of the things that he didn't do as when I was a kid or when he told me he was done.
You didn't take his inventory?
What
are you doing?
I did that for 33 years. So I figured I can give him an hour.
Give him a break for an hour.
Where I wasn't. And so it was for me owning my side of the street. I was not a good son. I could have been better. This is my stuff.
Yep.
And something happened in that. And we didn't just get a relationship that we used to have because we never had a really great relationship. But we had a whole new relationship beyond anything that we ever had and ever probably could have if we didn't go through. Yeah. And looking today, him setting that boundary of, I can't help you. I hated him in the moment, and I love him to death for doing that now.
That's one of the best things he ever did for you.
Because
he wasn't helping you anyways with everything he was doing before. Just like all of our parents, anytime they, we talk about that all the time. There's a pretty fine line between helping and enabling when it comes to somebody that's in our situation.
Yeah.
So
And we know how to pull on the heartstrings of those family members, and we wear them out. And
good manipulators.
Absolutely. Professionals at it.
We take hostages.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so years later, we got to talk about it, and his wife said that was the hardest decision he has ever had to make. And so I don't take that lightheartedly. So when family members reach out to us on BKR, a lot of times they're struggling with those boundaries, and that's an example that I use is the thing that you do that you don't want to do, that you feel like you're going to be hurting them in the moment, will be the thing that when they cross over to that other side, they're going to look at you and be thankful and grateful, and your relationship's going to build off of that.
Yep.
So. Yeah, I think that's important to highlight, though, that like families who are watching this, it's hard to set those boundaries and say no and take a step back, but you have to do it if your loved one is not getting it. You cannot continue to enable bad decisions. Don't keep bailing them out of jail. Don't keep giving them money. Don't keep putting gas in their tank or money, on their books or anything like that. Like, we have to feel the full weight of our consequences.
Well, and all four of us can sit here and tell you honestly, like, that is a huge part of what helped us turn our lives around and what helped us save our lives. Like, yes, ultimately.
Right now, the podcast.
I don't think any of us would be here if it weren't for that.
No, not at all.
And I think one of the most important things that you guys both said, Andrew, the way that you said it you said it really well, but Sam, you said it also. Giving back to your community, using your experience to help other people, like that gives you a feeling that no drug or alcohol ever did. Like that hole that we all had inside of us, like that's something real that we can fill that hole with without having to put a needle in our arm or drink a bottle or whatever it is. And like that really is the essence of what we do today. Right. Like that's what we do with BKR. That was the whole purpose of starting BKR. So just, I know we've only got a few minutes left, but like real quick, can you guys just talk about like your role with BKR? Like, what do you guys do? Like, what's the point of it?
Go ahead.
Yeah. So as far as on the app, we respond to individuals who are reaching out for help. So one of the things, we have a ton of lived experience. So for a long time, I said, I'm going to get clean and then I'm going to act like that never happened.
He says that all the time.
That was my story too. Right. I wanted to put it all behind me. I didn't want to ever look at it again, put it in a box.
I lived in another country for a decade and now I'm back, and that's why I have no story.
I always wanted to be normal.
Right. It turns out when you work this program of recovery, that becomes like our biggest strength.
Yep.
And so now we get to utilize that through things like BKR. And so family members, individuals looking for help, when they ask questions, I can speak from a place of I have been there or I have experience, or I know someone else who has been there or have experience. And so we can provide a support. We can help family members who have loved ones that they're worried about, even if they're not ready for help. We can help the family members through walking out the process, what boundaries look like, what finding treatment options look like, what supporting a person in a way that's not going to lead to their death looks like. So I say I have the best job in the world because I get to use a decade of me just being a hot mess to help other people, hopefully not spend as much time being a hot mess and lost and confused,
Yeah, using your pain for your platform, that's what this is all about. And really making those connections. At the end of the day, that's how I believe my job boils down to, whether that's making connections with that individual at that hotel that's still struggling, making that connection with the family member who's worried about that individual at the hotel that's struggling, or making that connection with a family member who's already lost that person and doesn't know who to talk to, so it can connect them to somebody else who's been there. And giving them hope and a little bit of peace, knowing that, yeah, it's tough, but it's going to be all right at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, they always say the opposite of addiction is human connection, and I think that's something you guys kept coming back to in your story.
When you were in treatment, you did well. When you were in sober living homes, for the most part, other than Andrew relapsing while he was there, you guys did really well because you had that connection. but while you're there, you had that connection, right?
Yeah,
right.
There were still some other pieces that were missing, and that's why that happened. And I know we've all had that same experience too. But for the most part, we do way better when we're in situations like that. But then you leave and you go back home, and now you're just with Sam, and now you're just with Andrew. You don't really have a chance.
But then when you connected with others and you have a community mindset, I think that's huge. Like thinking about how can we have a positive impact. Like I always like talk about how we were part of the problem. Now we get the privilege of being part of the solution. And I think a big thing for everybody is finding their purpose. And it sounds like you guys found your purpose in helping other people and expecting nothing in return, just doing it because you love people and you just want to help.
Yeah.
Well, and one last thing, if you guys could say something to somebody, because here's one thing we run into a lot with a lot of people. I know you guys do, I know Tommy and I do. People that are in the throes of addiction, but that play the victim card of the justice system has it out for me. The justice system sucks. It doesn't help me at all. It's all against me.
My family's against me. They won't help me anymore.
Well, specifically the justice system, in my opinion, because that's something we hear about repeatedly. Like, do you guys feel like you guys would be sitting here if the justice system just said, hey, hands off, do whatever you want to do? Do you think you'd be sitting here today?
I'd be dead.
Absolutely. Justice system saved my life. I got legal intervention, which I absolutely needed because I was literally killing myself time and time again. And so without that legal intervention, setting me down in jail because I was not capable of being safe with myself, I needed that. And so that's not the first option, but that needs to be a last resort. And so, and those individuals believe that they are out to get them because they feel attacked and they don't see a way out.
Yeah.
But that's okay. They're just not there yet.
Well, and one thing in my experience I've always seen is that the people in the justice system, like you guys said, they really want you to do well. No judge wants to sit there and throw someone in prison. People say, oh, they just want to throw me in prison. No, they don't. The judges that I know light up when somebody comes in who came through their court and is doing well. That fills up their soul. A lot of times they're pessimistic and they may be a little harsh. That's because they see people come in and what do we do in active addiction? We lie, we cheat, we steal, and then we try to make people feel crazy for believing the truth, right? So they've had a bunch of people stand there, BS them and all that stuff. Were you going to say something, Sam?
I was just going to say, I worked with Judge Newton when I was in Huntington, and my first case, she gave me a chance. I violated, she gave me another chance. Violated again, she gave me another chance. And then she said, you know what, you're done. I'm going to throw away the key. You're going away for however long I had. I think it was 9 months. But today I get to work with her. And, I got to tell her that story. Right? And she absolutely loves it. And to go along with Nate's point, they're not trying to harm us. They're not trying to throw away the lock and key, so to speak. They just generally, most of the time, want to see us do better. And I think at the end of the day, that's what everybody wants, is just to see somebody do better. Us as a society, we're tired of watching people die.
Yes.
And at the end of the day, that's what's going to happen if we continue our use. All of us on this couch together, we're in a place where we were lying on a bathroom floor, dead, blue, but by the grace of God, we were saved, and we get to help other people find their way now. The justice system, all it is accountability until you can get your ducks in a row and resources to find the rest of the way out, right? And if you can look at it like that, you'll be in a good spot. Just shift that perspective a little bit.
Yeah, I always like to highlight as well, real quick, one last thing. I know I keep saying that.
We got 4 last things.
I know.
Well, have one last
they're all
thing.
good things. Well, one more good thing, I'll say that. We talk a lot about the number of people that die from overdoses, and you could take that number and multiply it by 10 for how many people it really impacts on a personal level. Yeah. I think you could take a person who is in recovery, who's overcome those things and did what you guys are talking about, taking that experience in the darkness and that light that comes inside of you, and going back in the darkness and leading people to the light, you can multiply that by 50 or 100. You know, like the impact is so much greater of somebody that gets in recovery and stays in recovery and starts thinking about helping people other than themselves.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I just love that you guys have that in your story. It's just
So,
so
ripple
important.
effect that you'll never really see with
Right.
your own eyes, but it's definitely happening. And I mean, here's an example of it right here. It's
You
a
never
small
knew
one,
that
but
what you were
Yeah.
doing was going to impact him and come to me.
Yeah.
And so that's us walking it out and living it out. It's not always the things we say. It's like us walking and living out our recovery loudly
Yeah.
in front of people. And they're like, oh, that's impactful.
Well, and it's funny because, you know, when I worked with Sam, I didn't know that he was I didn't know you were gonna make it. I don't know. We don't pick winners and losers, right?
Yeah.
It's funny because I had somebody message me last night who works in Parkview, who's actually another alumni of ours, but they're in recovery. Somebody I also thought would never make it. And they said they're having a hard time because they have so many people come to the ER who are addicted to drugs and alcohol and in such bad shape, and they feel like they're not getting through them and they're getting burnt out. But what I always like to tell people is just keep planting seeds, because you never know when that's going to grow. Keep planting seeds, keep watering. You never know when it's going to grow. And I think all four of us here could probably think of 10 people that poured into us when we didn't deserve it. And here we are today. And there's things that come to me even now that I didn't even realize I heard when they were speaking to me. And I'm like, that's what he was talking about.
Yep.
You know, so if you're watching and you're burnt out and you feel like you don't know what you're doing and nobody's listening to you, keep planting seeds, because you might be talking to an Andrew or a Sam or a Tommy, and you just never know.
And if you're watching and maybe you're struggling, thinking about taking that step towards recovery, I really liked what you said about how Sam helped you realize that going to meetings and getting a sponsor and working the steps and giving back to your community and doing all this stuff, like it wasn't weird to do any of that. Like it was actually cool, and you started to enjoy it. So if you don't think that recovery is cool,
Right.
I don't know what else to tell you.
Well, we'll end with a Mike Mullering quote, my father. And
hear
he
it.
said, Nate, when before the age of 25, everybody just says, it's okay, Nate's just figuring out life. But after 25, you're just an asshole. So get it together.
Yes.
I was the
agree.
asshole.
Don't wait till you're 25, though. If you're
Yeah.
23, it's okay. You can get it together now. You might still be an asshole. So,
But never too late to stop being an asshole. That's the point. And I certainly was, so I can say that.
all right. Anything else you guys want to add before we end it?
I don't think so.
Nope.
All right. Well, thank you guys for coming on today. We appreciate your time.
Appreciate you guys.
Awesome.
Thanks for having
Thanks,
us.
guys.
All right. We'll see you next time.